outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Okay, welcome everybody. Good evening. It's really good to have you here. Welcome to this special show sponsored by Bloomsbury Publishing. This evening we have Andrew Jennings, who will be talking about two of his books, his newest books that are coming out this year or have come out, I don't know, this year, Ninja Text Types and Model Rights. That's one. And Sentence Ninja. That is a mouthful. Andrew, welcome to the show. I think it's a bit of a fan moment there. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited. I'm a bit of a language geek, language nerd. I love reading anything to do with teaching and teaching language. So I'm really chuffed to have you here with us. I'd like to start at the beginning, Andrew, because we have just a little over an hour. So you have this whole Ninja series. Can you tell us, please, about the series as a whole? What's the deal with Ninja?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. It's great to be on. I feel like I used to do things like this all the time, and for whatever reason, over the last few years, it hasn't happened as much. So it's great to get back on and have the opportunities to talk about books, writing, reading, whatever it may. I know it's writing tonight. But yeah, the Ninja brand, as it was or is, has developed. I was just talking to my wife, funnily enough, about it the other day when we were talking about these books publishing. She hadn't realised that these books had been written. And we were sort of saying again, how many books is it now? And I think in sort of the past 7 years, it's nearly 40 books that I've written about all sorts of subjects, whether it be reading, writing, grammar, arithmetic, math, everything really, everything to do with just being a primary school teacher. And I suppose that's where it all began, back on the sort of on the edgy Twitter scene, as it was sort of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 9 years ago, I suppose it really was sort of there. We used to, myself, friends, Paul Watson, we used to drive down to lots of different conferences. I think the first one we ever went to was one called Lead, Learn, Lancs, which I'm not sure whether people have heard. I know Primary Rocks was always the main sort of one that got a lot of attention, but there was Lead, Learn, Lancs was, I think, the first one that I went to. I met lots of fab people and saw them again and again over many conferences. But that was where it all started, just wanting to get involved in sort of a little bit like we were talking backstage, just about being interested in being in education and wanting to sort of converse and be around other people that were very much like-minded.
Yeah.
And I think that the name, there was nothing intentional about any of it. It was just a little blog post that I'd started writing just as Mr. Jennings. And the Ninja aspect just came up around the sort of the diligence of being a good teacher and talking about finding those opportunities to sort of to be alert and aware and to jump on those moments as a teacher, and sort of that's where it all sprang from, really. So there's nothing, although it seems quite nowadays, there's nothing particularly impressive about it.
So nothing superhero-esque, but I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that back to my classroom. What you've just said there, this being a ninja, being alert. I think one thing I tell my students a lot, so my pre-service teachers, is, we can teach you so much here in your teacher education program, but at the end of the day, you've got to be able to read your classroom. You're there to teach the students and not to teach the curriculum. I mean, yeah, the powers that be say you've got to teach the curriculum, but at the end of the day, we can, to express it differently, we're actually there to teach the students. So be alert. I was saying this ninja thing that tickled me a little because I don't know if you've read the series, The Magic Tree House by Mary Pope Osborne. And when my kids were younger, they really loved that series. So it's about these two kids in Pennsylvania, and they've got this tree in their backyard, I think. And when they go into that tree, and there's a whole load of books, and they open the book and there's a picture of a place, and if they were to say, oh, I wish I could go there, and the tree spins around and takes them there, and one of the installments in the book was to go to Japan, to Meiji, Japan, and as with many children's books, the two kids got into trouble there, and they were given a piece of advice. Every episode has, or every book has a piece of advice, and the kids have to, figure it out themselves. What can they do with this piece of advice? And the thing with the ninja, it was like, think like a ninja, be like a ninja, and something else. And I was just trying to think, right? Okay, so how do ninjas write sentences?
Yeah.
But okay, see, I segued into that so brilliantly. Let's look at the first book, because we really don't have a lot of time. Sentence Ninja as your first one. Now, in your intro, I have to say that tickled me as well. Actually, the whole thing tickled me. We could go on forever here. In your intro, you actually dared the reader to ask the next pupil they saw what a sentence was, right?
Yeah.
So I took up that challenge. I asked my 9-year-old, right? And his name is Sean. And I went, Sean, what's a sentence? Now, you got to have a little bit of background here. We live in Germany. Sean goes to German medium education. So all his language and literacy in the first instance is German, but we speak English at home. So Sean's essentially bilingual. Sean grew up, most of his kindergarten years were during COVID when I was at home teaching. So he was one of the few 5-year-olds who would go into kindergarten and be able to tell people what a noun was and what a verb was and what an adjective was, because I was teaching from home. So he heard all that, right? He picked that all up. So I asked him, I said, Sean, what's a sentence? He was very bothered by that question because he was in the middle of doing something on his iPad. But
I knew you were going to say
yeah. But he said to me, and I had to shake myself out of this. He actually said, and I've written this down. So he's in year 3. We're bilingual, and he says to me confidently, as if it was the most natural question in the world, a sentence is a group of multiple words that make their own meaning.
Okay.
Now, this is Sean, who learned about sentences in German in the first instance. He hasn't learned about English sentences, but he probably knows it's the same. So we want more children and pupils to be able to say that, right? We want more people with the same confidence. Where have we gone wrong? Why? What happened there? It's the most basic thing, and it's gone awry there.
I think there's so many reasons, isn't there? And we could talk about it for an hour and not probably get to the bottom of it, along with education ministers and whoever else. I think just even in that, in the premise of asking them the question, I think is even just probably part in me even suggesting that is part of the problem. In that, I think quite along the way with the new curriculum, especially with grammar, to a certain extent, one of the things I'd definitely mention it in the book is around sort of teaching with hints and tips, or you just being able to define what something is and then not really be able to sort of really understand it in depth and manipulate it and apply it and really reason within, sounds a bit so reason within writing, using your words and how you manipulate sentences and so on. So I think a lot of that, especially from my experience in terms of teaching in England in multiple schools, is children, and as we said beforehand as well, one of the biggest things is children just not having the opportunity to really focus in on having sentences taught at a really explicit level consistently throughout their time in primary school. And just as an example, one of the things, real sort of life, just sort of like, how do I visualize what Andrew's talking about, is that if we're trying to build something that's more concrete, which is a writing outcome, which is the outcome that we want in English. But if we were trying to do that in a practical sense, in terms of trying to, something that everyone understands, build a house and all of the components that are required, and the skill and the knowledge and the experience to be able to actually build something physically, there's so much that goes into that. Experience, resilience, failure, everything that goes alongside that to build something that is a finished product. And I think sometimes because of the curriculum, especially, children don't have enough of that to be able to get to, say, for example, year 6, and not just about being for year 6, but being secondary ready and being able to write as a writer, because you have all of these real genuine writing skills at sentence level. I think, and this isn't to say that every school has this issue, because that won't be the case. But from my experience working with thousands of pupils over the past sort of decade, is that many pupils, especially in poorer areas, would get to those upper echelons of primary school and really struggle just to independently write specific sentences, let alone just be able to sit down and go, really understand a real wide range of genres and text types, and just be able to go, have a brief introduction to some sort of context, and just naturally be able to write a piece of writing that contains simple, compound, and complex sentences, because that's all we're really talking about, and being able to use a comma to structure clauses. I think in the book I go on to say, there's really only sort of, and it sounds a lot, but it's not. There's around about 28 sentences, I think, sentence types that we really want children to manage, of which there's 7 or 8 in compound, 7 or 8 in complex. So that builds up really, really quickly in terms of the structure. That's where we want children to get to in terms of being able to really sort of, as they're getting into upper key stage 2, have really mastered every single sentence type, had thousands and thousands of opportunities to use and apply them independently and make mistakes, and have teachers really deep dive into those sentences with them, so that when they go off to secondary school, which is what it's all about, off to secondary to flourish, children are going to secondary school massively confident, really highly skilled in terms of those foundations of just being able to form a basic library of sentences that will enable them to be really, really successful at secondary level. And just to sort of caveat that right at the end, my experience goes beyond working in primary schools. I spent 2 or 3 years just after COVID working in secondary schools, working with the exact pupils in a different area that were going into secondary and really, really struggling to get on in secondary education, because the standard of writing that they were at just didn't allow them to cope and achieve at secondary, and they were just behind from the start. So I suppose everything that I've tried to put together in this book, although I haven't really talked about it other than what's the problem, is really trying to sort of solve that for teachers, for pupils, and for leaders in schools.
Yep. I mean, it's important to kind of pin down what the problem is, because otherwise, people are going to say, oh, look, it's another book on writing, right? But we want to show, right, where we're headed and where we've come from. And what you're saying, I think, is really important. And I see it here in Germany. I can only, give you a contrastive view, where we all know, no matter where in the world, if you don't develop those basic skills, right, at a very young age, it has that domino effect. And I remember when I was working in the UK, that the young people that I was working with at university, or I'd been reading somewhere where employers were saying that the young people entering the job market don't have the required writing skills. Yeah, never mind the critical thinking skills, but their writing skills are so poor. And the question is, people were saying, oh, but where can we put it in the curriculum? I mean, do you put it in at university, writing 101, or do you put it in secondary school? But oh no, but then that's too late. And then so you look further down the chain, and what you're saying, and from what I was looking, what I saw in Sentence Ninja, where you'd had this lovely table with the curriculum, the national curriculum, it's just so packed.
Yeah,
it is massively packed. And as we go ahead,
there's an irony there in that it is absolutely packed, and yet I think there's 2 versions of the curriculum that I've got in the book, one of which is the actual curriculum, where I've tried to pick out where the curriculum actually, because if again, we're talking about writing, but the book is essentially about developing children's sort of mastery of sentences and a clear progression through school. If you look at the actual national curriculum alongside the grammar appendix as well, sort of meshing them in together, there is a sort of there's a huge amount of content in there. But when you actually just start to unpick, well, where is the sentence level focus? If that is the foundations of children being able to write, and it's really fragmented, and in some instances where you find what objectives and expectations there are, for example, in year 2, all of a sudden it moves on really, really quickly in year 2 through a number of conjunctions and into different sentence types when children are really only beginning to sort of understand, year 2 is still very young. And then in year 3 and 4, there isn't really much directive content in there. And any primary school teacher in England will, there's always that sort of the cliches around year 3 and 4 where it's like a catch-up year, and it's this,
Okay.
And then in year 6 again, there's a year 5 and 6, there's another huge amount of content that sort of comes in. So I've tried to unpick that, and sort of in my model of the sort of sentence level curriculum, there's really sort of a year by year, term by term progression of what the actual national curriculum is wanting from children, so that schools and teachers can really sensibly teach the sentence level content that children need to master over, a really sequenced and progressive period of time. Because I think if you do follow the curriculum, which we do follow, things are a little bit disjointed and fragmented. So again, when we talk about what are the problems and what are the solutions, the curriculum isn't really specific at sentence level. So the book, to a certain extent, really tries to combat that and give teachers a resource and senior leaders a resource where we can really map out sentence level teaching and progression over the 6 years of primary school.
I think the book is really helpful, and I'm looking here at the book on page 20. I mean, you might not know that off by heart, but I think you have you have your own copy there. So, and I'm looking at it on page 20, right, where you have the sentence ninja whole school sentence progression. I'm approaching this now. First of all, I think it's great. I think it makes so much sense. I don't know if it makes sense to me because I teach young people to teach English as a foreign language. So our curriculum is obviously different, and we are using a lot of that terminology. I think a lot more like, subject, verb, object, predicate, adjectives, adverbs. So we do a lot of that work in the English as a foreign language field. I'm wondering if this is especially helpful, and you've got a niche here because teachers, or in training programs, in teacher education programs, you've got the subject knowledge, but you don't necessarily, especially for language, English language, you don't acquire or develop that language awareness, that you would need in order to teach language. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I'm thinking what you've got here in this whole progression overview, that's really, really helpful, because the teacher could just go, okay, so this is what the national curriculum wants the children to be able to do at the end of year 1. And hey, look at that, we've got this here. And they can just, would you say it's a ready-made resource, a ready-made tool for schools?
Absolutely, the progression's there, and I think two-thirds of the book itself is then the photocopyable content and resources to, I really always hate going to training where someone would say you could do this or you should do that, and then you go away from it and think, well, where do I even start? Especially when you're not particularly experienced. So the book, first sort of third is the rationale and the subject knowledge around it. But then, as you said, it's very much about equipping teachers and progressions of teachers in schools. I'm really passionate about that, being able to see something that it doesn't just, obviously the book will help teachers in isolation if that's the sort of school it is. But ideally is that there's that joined up thinking from year group to year group where we see that progression of attention to detail around sentences, to enable children to progress throughout the school and pick up and not drop off, to ensure that they are achieving. And I think we discussed it. I briefly touched on this before we started the conversation. It's not only about teaching the content and teaching it consistently, sort of every day, really being able to dive into those opportunities, but having those opportunities to practice is really, really important. I think we did touch on it before, but I'm really passionate about children having the opportunity to practice, and I think it's so underrated in schools. As you've already said it, the curriculum is packed, and I know there's so much to get into. And I think sometimes being able to take a step back and go, let's just focus on the things that obviously we have to teach what we need to teach, but what are the most valuable things that we can teach? And let's ensure that we teach those consistently every day. And I think sentence structure, children having a real strong awareness, sort of subject knowledge of a variety of sentence structures, but also the actual skill to be able to apply that in writing outcomes is crucial. And as I said to you before we started, children having the opportunity to practice again and again and fail and succeed and discuss and share and have another go and decide that they don't think it's good enough or that it's great, having that every single day consistently, having those opportunities to practice is absolutely crucial. And that's what the books as well is really trying to do. I do that. All the resources that I produce, whether it's web-based or whether I speak to teachers and deliver training, reading comprehension, consistency and regularity is absolutely central to children getting better at anything. And just my little final point on that is what you will find with children is that when you do things consistently with them, they get better at it and they enjoy it more. So my thing every year about this time of year was always arithmetic in school. So I'd be starting arithmetic boosters and things like that for year sixes. And by the time the sort of 12-week booster had finished, the children at the start who weren't particularly great at arithmetic, but because every single day they'd come with me, we'd build a rapport, we'd focus on it, they'd learn, they'd get better, they'd have success, they would enjoy it. At the end of the 10 weeks, when they'd do the SATs and they'd get great results, and they'd say, Mr. Jennings, are we doing our arithmetic booster this week? And I'd be sort of, well, no, because we've done this for no reason to. And the children were genuine every year, different groups of children, genuinely devastated that they weren't doing this dedicated arithmetic session, because the children and adults, we get joy from things that we improve at and that we get better at. So when we talk about children who maybe don't enjoy writing as well, I can fully imagine that they don't enjoy writing, probably because they have very little confidence in it, they have low skill, and as a result, it just isn't an enjoyable experience. And as human beings, we don't like doing things that we don't enjoy. That's what it comes. I think with skill comes confidence, and with confidence and skill comes real, genuine enjoyment, and that's when we really learn.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we don't enjoy something if things are boring, right? In my son's school in Germany, there's a lot. Well, to say in German, that's maybe a little bit of a generalization, but my son has to write sentences all the time ever since they started. So they only have 4 years in primary school, and they start in year one, they do the alphabets, the sounding out, that whole similar equivalent to phonics, and then they do sentences. And a lot of how they're taught, a lot of those principles I see in your book, so that in Sentence Ninja, so that resonated with me. And I think what I really like is that journey of discovery. So you have the exercises with the subject and verb strips, right? So you have sentences, so circle the subject in each sentence, so that you had on page 28, and then draw a rectangle around the verb. My son had to do exercises like that, activities like that, practice that. And I think that if you start with something like that to teach this, your pupils, teach children these basic concepts in a sentence, that's children like discovering things.
Absolutely.
Right. And they discover it through discovery, they learn. And then it's not tedious. I mean, my son has said, he was looking at my notes here for our show, and he was saying he was saying, yeah, I agree. He said, sometimes writing those sentences is tedious and it's boring, but other times he quite likes it. And I think that's, you have to find what children will like. I have to say though, I got stumped on page 29 on the verb strip, but that was because I was thinking too far ahead. You had you had the verb strip, and the instruction was fill in the gap in each sentence with a verb. And and the first one was dad was and the first thing that came to mind was dad was tired, and I was like, no, tired is not a verb. So yeah, caught me out there.
But I think that those, and obviously writing and sentence level understanding is massively entwined in children understanding the word classes and the grammar that are associated with it. And that isn't to say that it needs to be complicated. The subject and the verb, and just understanding those basics can just help when it comes to children forming sentences. Just being able to identify those, two basic premises, as you said your son has, even once they can understand and spot those things, essentially they have a clause that could be, punctuated as a sentence. But again, if you had me just tell you that once or twice, that isn't going to stick. You need to have the opportunities again and again to identify them, to spot them, to see non-examples, to write those opportunities yourself, to see teachers model them day after day after day. And eventually, for all children, hopefully, that's when it's far more likely to stick. And then when you move on to the next little step after that, and then you mention those things again, and they see that that's what a sentence is. I'm not sure how many children going right back to one of the first things is, so what's the problem? The basics a lot of the time are and that again isn't me sitting here saying everybody gets the basics wrong, because that isn't the case. But this is something I'd wanted to write for years, really. Right. I remember talking to Helen at Bloomsbury and saying, I really want to write this book and produce something that really because when I first started teaching, I didn't have this knowledge, I didn't have this awareness, I didn't have that level of subject knowledge. And it's something that I've developed over time that I don't want someone else to have to spend 12 years to work it out when, do you know what I mean? I think that's why I wanted to write the book. And, that's why I write all the books, is to really help teachers, build that subject knowledge level quickly and try and save them some time. Because as you said, it is hectic, isn't it? Everything can be quite hectic quite quickly. So having the resources there to help them is really important as well. And just going back to it, like you said, and that's the beauty of we can talk about learning to write sentences as potentially a little bit dull or repetitive, but that's the beauty of primary school, isn't it? Is that most people most teachers, everyone that's sat here, you can see a few bookshelves behind me. That's why you bring sentence level content to life, is with the texts and the stimuluses that you're using, whether it's video, whether it's AI. Ideally, there's going to be fabulous text that teachers are using alongside. Any text that you're using to teach from, this is just going to seamlessly slide in there with it all for you to bring that to life. It's just implementing these techniques and approaches to what you do already and carving out maybe 5 or 10 minutes every day of an English lesson to really focus in on sentence level practice every single day.
Yeah. I mean, what you had said earlier, right, about not having the subject knowledge is exactly what I'd been thinking, or I had touched on with teachers not having that language awareness, you not having the language to talk about language. I mean, you don't have to throw out all those meta-linguistic terminology at your students, right? But not having, because you don't have the language knowledge, that language of awareness, then what happens in a lot of classrooms, both in the English as a foreign language class and English L1, is that teachers just gloss over everything, right? They gloss over, and it's what we were talking about pre-show. Why does that happen in the classroom? In extracurricular activities for music and sport, you teach them one technique or one strategy, and the mantra is practice, 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 and then you've got it.
That's
Why
it.
are we not doing that in the English classroom? Why are we not doing that in classrooms? End off, right? Why do we just put that on the board? This is a noun. A noun is a person, a place, or a thing. End off. Now you know it.
Well, I think you're exactly right there. I think a lot of it, and I was guilty of this very much so when I first started teaching, is my own subject knowledge and confidence when it came to sort of the understanding of grammar and everything, the stuff that really mattered that sat behind what you were teaching. I think the reason why people gloss over stuff is because, and I did in my early career, is because they don't have the subject knowledge and confidence to be able to dive into that themselves. So it's all well and good giving someone a book of resources, but if they don't have the subject knowledge to actually be able to teach it. And like I always, one of my examples on some of the vocabulary training that I do is links back to the basics of, I think I call this something like superficial teaching. And it's exactly around the example that you just gave there around we teach children, about verbs, for example, and the classic how verbs is taught is it's a doing word.
Yeah.
And that phrase is how it's taught, and then it's glossed over and it's gone. And they hear that from one teacher, another teacher, another teacher. And the amount of times I've bumped into children in year 6 classrooms or whatever it may be, and you dive into some teaching, and within some sentence level modelling or something like that. So what's a verb? And children will just recite it's a doing word, and all of a sudden you're thinking, wait, there's potentially an issue here, because if everybody's understanding is just it's a doing word and they can't identify it in the modelled sentence on the board, there's a real issue. And this is what I mean. The phrase that I used is safety net teaching. Teaching with these safety net phrases that a verb is a doing word, an adjective is a describing word, a noun's a person, a place, or a thing. And it's great that they can recite that, but it's so superficial that the moment you tap on it, it cracks and there's nothing underneath. And that's one of the massive problems that we have. And that isn't, everywhere, but I've experienced that a lot over the years. And that's exactly what you said.
I mean, I think it goes back in part to the teacher education program. I think, young people, they're acquiring their subject knowledge, their knowledge for teaching, but not then the actual skills. I don't know many people who can tell you, in my teacher education program, I was actually really taught how to teach sentence level writing. No. But we've got to move on because we have a second book. I love sentences. I have to say, I was just before we go to the second. I mean, sentences are important. Where would we be without sentences, right?
Exactly.
What I find
that's a great way to finish it, though, isn't it? On that point, is that if we're thinking about where we want children to be, in education, nearly everything that they're going to do is going to stem back to their ability to articulate themselves in a written form, in terms of, and having an arsenal of fairly basic sentence types, and there isn't that much that they need to master to be able to write really, really well. So I think regardless of books and things like that, I think you're right. It's a skill of massive importance for all children.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of makes me a little sad is when I see how young people communicate with each other in social media, or writing to mom and dad on WhatsApp on the phone. And English teacher me, I think once, only once, I actually did write in a message back to my daughter, can you not write sentences?
Yeah.
And work has it. Before we go to your next book, though, I have to say what I really like about the activities, they're photocopiable, but the more a teacher uses them, it gives them, it's not just a resource for the classroom, but once they get familiar with the rationale, the concept of an activity, it's a springboard for them to create their own similar activities.
Yeah, they're very repetitive.
But that's the beauty of it, actually.
Yeah. And ideally, that that would be the beauty of any sort of training, isn't it? That once
Yeah.
or training or it's something that you're learning to implement, is that it can be then transferable or adaptable. And I think a lot of the resources Bloomsbury were great in sort of creating them in a way that I wanted them, so that they could just be sort of, whether it's a sort of a little square that can be sort of photocopied and trimmed out. They're really quite visually quite nice. I know they're not particularly amazing, like some sort of beautiful piece of artwork, but they'll look great stuck in books with children's writing. So there's some formative assessment tasks and stuff, so that once children get to certain points, there's real points for repetition, practice, but also ongoing sort of formative assessment, so we can really understand what children can do independently, as well as track what they can do. But a lot of them really just trim out. They're very simple. There's probably about 6 to 10 different activity types. But like you said, once those are potentially exhausted, there's nothing really in the way of you just creating something very, very similar, very quickly, that will do the same job around the different subject area. Really, really simple.
I mean, especially the one with the short passage of text, where every sentence contains a subject and a verb, and they have to, circle the subject, draw a rectangle around each verb. A teacher can easily take short passages of text out of, whatever the children are reading at the moment. So that's on page 33, right?
Yeah.
They can take it on anything that the children are reading at the moment. So it's actually also timeless.
Yeah.
If they were reading the Magic Tree House, maybe that cohort of kids, Magic Tree House is the big thing, or Dogman maybe at another point, right? It comes to life for the kids.
Yeah, essentially, I think once you've sort of understood what the book's trying to do and the resources it's trying to do, essentially, whether it be yourself, AI, whatever it may be, there's many ways that those principles can be continued, adapted, made even better, and driven forward. So I genuinely hope, I'd never want to write something or create something that was just done for the sake of it. I genuinely hope that teachers and schools get their hands of copies of this book, and it really has an impact for children and for teachers. That's what the goal is. There's no point in doing it otherwise.
I think it's a proper resource book. It's not, like you have other books on the market and people go, what, is that just another practice book? I mean, we have loads of self-study grammar books for EFL. And then now one more thing, and then we really have to go to the other book. I love sentences, if you haven't
got a
noticed.
nice cover as well, hasn't it? So it's quite snazzy.
Sentences and snazziness. Look at you. Have you probably have, but did you know, for lack of saying it, for lack of ability to say it better, oh my God, once children understand the concept of subject and verb, their reading comprehension ability improves. I mean, that now that I've said it out loud, that's kind of stating the obvious.
I think, being able to see that in reading, obviously sometimes like we're doing now, we're talking about things in isolation, aren't we? But obviously English is a subject, when everything comes together, your grammar side of it, the writing, the reading, the phonics, everything. As you just said there, everything benefits everything, doesn't it? And I think children being able to understand subject and verb and understand how a clause is formed, and that it can be punctuated as a sentence, even just that core understanding as they're reading, they can see the practice. And like you've said, you've said before, even just that little bit of subject knowledge as a teacher, even when it just comes to sort of general questioning in teaching and learning, you could be reading a text, any text at any time, not because of sentence teaching, and you could stop and pause and just, if children have got copies or it's on the board, and just have that discussion around, well, what's the subject and the verb in this sentence that C.S. Lewis has written, or J.K. Rowling, whoever it may be, and just that, having that subject knowledge yourself and the children having that subject knowledge allows for that dialogue to happen again and again and again and more frequently, because everybody actually understands. Otherwise, other than just going, what's a verb, or what's, because you can't get into any discussion and deeper understanding from just a throwaway safety net phrase, as I sort of mentioned before.
Yep, yep. And of course, you know, from sentences we move on to paragraphs. Paragraphs move on to text types. Text types. I love text types. First thing I thought when I read the title, text type model writes text types. That's, oh, what a word. But genre, that text types are genres. That's what I did in class a couple of weeks ago. Again, genres, something that teachers don't necessarily have the knowledge about. They, you know, I know that in England you study for your degree in English, right? You do English and it's usually literature and whatnot. Or you may have done English linguistics and then you go on and do your PGCE. But you don't really, as we've said already, you've not really, teachers haven't really acquired that in-depth knowledge about writing. The book has a different structure from Sentence Ninjas. It's divided into school years and text types. And why don't you tell us more?
So this book, as you said, it is a little bit different in that this is very much about pupils. So I suppose in essence, it's the other end of the spectrum, whereas sentences are very much about those building blocks. This is the house in terms of guiding teachers through essentially guided writing opportunities and giving children the opportunity to really sort of better understand different sort of text types. So what the book does, without being too vague, what the book does in essence is, it is for Key Stage 2, so years 3 through to 6. And in each year group, it has, I think, six model texts. What the aim is to guide children through different text types so they get a real strong, and again, when we talk about sentences, we're talking about in-depth learning. And again, with the text types, it's trying to give children the opportunity to get a significant in-depth understanding of different text types. And I think one of the reasons why children maybe don't have this is that in a lot of instances, if I just look at the overview, I've got it here. So we talk about instructions, history narrative, setting description, hidden perspectives, recounts, letters, diary entries. When I grew up, and I'm 41 now, and children, I've got 10-year-old twins, so they're in that generation now that are in year 6. But they're just not, you know, even when I was a child, you know, even probably through till a teenager in my 20s, newspapers were still a thing that you would see around the house. You would still actually maybe just get a letter here and there off someone, maybe not in my 20s, but definitely in my sort of early teens, and maybe be a letter from an auntie or an uncle. You think about diary entries, you know, everything now is so digital that children, or my children, I can tell you quite honestly, I can't remember them if they will have seen a newspaper. It's just not something that we really sort of have in our house. Diary entries, newspaper reports, you know. So these text types are really only things that children are going to see probably in school. And one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book was I always found that when it came to just that creative writing side of things, where you would ask children to, you know, for example, write a newspaper report. Say we were going to write a newspaper report for some sort of creative writing task about someone robbing a bank or something like that, just off the top of my head. A lot of the time, the children would really, really struggle to even get anywhere near doing that because they had very weak understandings of how you would structure a newspaper report, how you would structure even though a diary entry is super basic in terms of how it's structured and the person that it's written in. Again, because I think writing over a long period of time has become very focused on a checklist ultimately in terms of have you got these features, and that's very much focus. I think that sort of real in-depth understanding of the sentence types that are contained within it, the person that it's written in, the structure that it has is potentially something I always felt that children really struggled with. So the aim of this book is it's basically got 3 units. I said 6, it's got 3 units per year group. And the idea is, so for example, in year 3, we've got instructions, a recount, and a narrative, which are 3 sort of classic text types that you would get in year 3, age appropriate, we've got instructions how to make a jam sandwich, recount a day at school, which is something that everybody will have experience of, so it's not an unfamiliar experience to write about, and then a narrative, which is, I think, is about the quest of the golden flower. But the idea is that over a period of 3 weeks, a period of a week, this unit would be delivered. So if we were doing instructions, we would deliver the instructions unit over a period of a week, and the children, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, would produce a finished writing outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So on the first day, or if that was going to be Monday, it doesn't have to be a Monday, but day 1 of 5, the children would do what I've called an immersive write, which basically, the teacher heavily guides them sentence by sentence through the creation of the text. Now, the book has this script, so it's not something that they just make up. So we have a text. We have a lovely model text that the children would see. So this is a day at school. But if I just nip back to how to make a jam sandwich. So we've got the visual aspect of how you make a jam sandwich. Really simple steps with all the sentence types that you would expect from Sentence Ninja. So simple sentences. And what happens is when the children write this on day 1, we have something called a familiarity script. And what that familiarity script does is it guides the teacher through the writing of the whole text, going through the different sentence types, why that sentence might be used here, why the next sentence will potentially be varied so that we have variation, or that maybe we have repetition. So there's a whole host of aspects within there, but there's a writing opportunity and a script that's basically runs alongside it to guide the teacher through guiding the children through writing a text.
Yeah.
At the end of day 1, the children would have a really, really in-depth understanding and experience of everything to do with writing that set of instructions. That then moves into a day 2 where there's what's called a dictated and planned write. So another thing which you may have experience of is that from my experience over the past 10 years, whenever, and I've seen it myself, I've seen it with other teachers, I've seen it in a whole host of environments where when a planning lesson happens, I always found that a planning lesson probably one of the most unproductive hours that the children would experience, because children weren't particularly skilled at planning a piece of writing. Ultimately, in that plan that we give them, what they'd end up doing is just writing what they would probably try and write the next day anyway. So it wasn't really an effective plan. So day 2 is planning their own rewrite based on the exact version that we've just done, but we're guiding them through the plan. So we're teaching the children how to actually plan and to think about what the next sentence might be, why we might need some variation, what should we think about next. So the planning script will then guide you through guiding the children how to plan an actual outcome for themselves. So, and that happens over, again, the course of the week until the Friday, where the children basically plan and create their own. So there's a huge amount of detail in the book. I'm trying to sort of explain it as clearly as I can. But the idea is that that's why there's only 3 units. It's not something that's meant to happen every week. It's maybe happening 3 times a year, where children get a real in-depth, deep dive into a text type and a real deep dive into how to write a text with the first immersive write, where they're guided through sentence by sentence how to write a text. And then planning sessions where they are guided through the planning and shown how sentence by sentence you might think about how you actually plan to write a set of instructions, what you think about next, the types of sentences you need to think about as you write the text, and so on. So it's a really explicit document, book, hopefully, that you've seen, that is designed, like you said, where teachers may not have that experience in doing that, the subject knowledge to do it. The book is designed to help teachers get children to an unaccompanied writing outcome at the end by taking them through really heavily scaffolded periods of guided writes, guided plans, scaffolding's taken away Wednesday, Thursday, and then they produce another one, and then on the Friday is a guided plan and then an independent write. So by the end of the week, the children are writing their own set of instructions that I would hope would be then classed as some level of independent writing for the pupil. Again, where they're getting confidence and going away from that and being able to go, I can do this for myself.
I mean, when you talk about it like that, it just makes so much sense. When I hope our viewers, our listeners who are listening into this, I know it's a bit difficult to visualize because you've not got the book in front of you, but you can go to bloomsbury.com to find a book. But when you describe it like that, it just makes so much sense. You learn to write by looking at, first of all, by looking at model writing.
Yeah.
And what you say about, planning lessons, you've just killed my class for tomorrow, because I actually had for my writing class tomorrow a planning lesson, and I actually did have, well, they're university students, but I did have an inkling, at the back of my head, I knew I like, this is going to fail, because I've just got this image of my students just sitting there looking at the brief and looking at each other, and
it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about it, when do we ever really, even in sort of year one, probably, it's like, right, it's now your opportunity. Plan what you're going to write this set of instructions about, and if you haven't got all those building blocks that we talked about in the first half of sort of this session, you don't have a varied understanding of grammar. You don't have the subject verb. You don't have any understanding of the text type, really. You don't have any life experience of making a jam sandwich. How on earth are you going to be able to plan? So I think part of the book is teaching children how to plan based on
what they've seen, and based on guiding questions. Based on guiding questions.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is modeling is so important. And it's essentially it's model. The book aims to model how to model, and it's something that I know lots and lots of schools want to see teachers doing, and it's something that people find really, really difficult to do in a lot of instances, because of subject knowledge, because of experience, because of a whole host of reasons. So again, the premise of the book is to be able to go, right, if modeling is is difficult, and we want these writing outcomes, and we want to guide children through a process of writing a text, here's a script that runs alongside it, that talks about the exact sentence structures, the person that we need to write in, the considerations we need to make around. I've said this about sentence level variation, grammatical variation, the vocabulary we need to be using. That's all built into the script, so that sentence by sentence we can teach a lesson, get an outcome, and pupils really leave that session with a real strong understanding of that's how you write a set of instructions and what it needs. This is also how you plan to write a set of instructions, so that you can go and do that yourself as we take the scaffold away over the course of a week. So it's a really intense week of writing where there's 3 sets of instructions or narratives that are written, but ultimately by the end of it, we've got one of them where children, the outcome is very independent.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the goal there, haven't you? And at the end, that independent writing gives the students, the children, a sense of accomplishment as well. I feel a bit bad now, because a couple of weeks ago, in connection with our grammar class for my pre-service teachers, I actually asked them to write a set of instructions on how to make an award-winning snowman, and how to make the best sandwich. And typical, I think you'll be familiar with that. They sit there and they go, well, I don't know where to begin.
Yeah.
Right. And there was me thinking, oh, come on, guys, you're 19. How can you not know where to begin? Yeah. But false assumption, bad assumption. What I really like especially is the familiarity script, because I think, and I see that with my own pre-service teachers who are going on to teach English in German schools, both in primary school and in secondary school, they don't have the knowledge of those text types.
No.
You know, I mean, they'll be able to, you know, like most other people, if you show them different text types, they can tell you, oh yeah, that's a newspaper report, or
Yeah.
that's an instruction, that's a diary entry.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then to say, okay, now take it one step further. Imagine you need to teach this alien from Mars, for whatever reason, how to write instructions on how to get home. You know, would you be able to do that? That, I think that's a different level of thinking, different level of engagement. So that's really, really nice for let's say, for the novice teacher, the teacher who's new to that, to help them confidently.
Yeah, and I think the real idea behind the familiarity script, because my awareness when I was first writing it was very much around people could go, well, so just to double check, Andrew, in essence, in lesson 1, the children are copying a set of instructions, and essentially, you know, you can argue that is what they're doing, but what they're doing is they're doing that along via a script, a familiarity script, and the whole premise of that is that the children gain that without us just moving on really, really quickly, because I've seen it before. Lesson 1, well, this is what a newspaper report is. We'll circle the features, dun, 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 tick, 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 next lesson, off we go. And really, there isn't really an understanding. And then on Friday, it comes, we've done all this stuff throughout the week. It gets to Friday, right, guys, you're writing a set of instructions about, you know, how to tie a shoelace. And all, you can see the children just going, like, where do I go with this? And it's big, because everything is being skimmed over too soon. We think there's depth, and we try to have it, but I think in a lot of instances, even just that visual understanding of what it looks like, and have actually experienced writing what a good one looks like, you know, a waggle, is and having the knowledge to do that. Because the familiarity scripts that I've written, when you think about that, if you were a teacher, to prep that would be really, really time consuming. It took me days to write them properly, to edit them, to change them, to make sure that how we wanted them. So to have that resource there to be able to go, I'm gonna show the children today, day 1, this is what a set of this is what a narrative looks like. This is what I don't know, whatever one of the other
diary entry,
a newspaper,
mystery story,
balanced argument. This is what a balanced argument looks like, and to go through it sentence by sentence in real explicit detail, and talk about the rationales and the grammar and the reasons why we're linking certain sentences, and why the next paragraph has to open with this, you know, this feature, and why, and the children seeing that and physically doing it and writing it and putting it on paper. And I think that's really, really valuable. They can't go away and misunderstand from that. They've actually experienced it. I think there's a thing of putting pen to paper and putting ink on it, that there's something there with that than just being told it.
Yeah, I was going to say something there. I can promise you it was something really clever, but now I've absolutely forgotten. No, okay. I don't know. Can't be that clever then.
But it's true, and that's what I think. It's nice that you pointed that out, because sometimes I've written it, and you know, I do think that bit at the start of really sort of, and like you said about the other book, there's nothing to stop people then going, you know what, that was really effective. I'm going to carry that bit of practice on in the next text that we do. When it might not be in the book, but the book has then enabled them to gain, because they've done it 3 times throughout the year and thought, you know what, when we do this unit, I'm going to write my own familiarity script, or I'm at least going to go through the process of modeling a full text with the children day 1, so that they have that real explicit understanding that really just helps someone build that teacher toolkit to go, that's how I start a unit of work that might be 3 weeks long, but we're going to start by doing that, so the children are really clear on the expectations and the features and experience the features that they actually need to include.
2 things. Now I remember what that almost clever thing was that I wanted to say. Crap. Okay, now got it. What I was going to say is that another reason why I think that familiarity script is so valuable, because even as a teacher, if let's say I didn't have your book and I wanted to go into class and teach, you know, how to write a sequence of instructions or how to write a diary entry, and I may know for myself what features this text type has, the grammar, the sentence type, what, your typical conjunctions, adverbs, and things like that. And I might put it on the board, but I might forget the one element or another. And of course, that will be the one element that some students going to say, oh, miss, but what about that? What is that?
Yeah.
Right? So that familiarity script is really, really useful, exceedingly useful. And then what teachers can do, say, if you have, with this whole, you have diverse levels, different levels of students in class, different abilities in class, what a teacher can do then is, having done, the model once with the familiarity script, the teacher could, set a similar task for other students and say, look, now why don't you look for a set of instructions, say, on how to change your bicycle tire, I don't know, and see what elements you see there, and what genre variation can you find there. So that I think that really is the beauty of that. The dictated writing script, I think you talked about that, where you tell students to go plan, and that's just really difficult. What is one thing that you're really proud of in this book, where you think, oh gosh, so smart here?
I won't say all of it.
No, but really, I mean, it's an amazing book. But what is the one thing that you thought, that you think, this is really valuable?
I do think I've probably said it already, and I know we're probably short on time. I think the familiarity script is important, but I do think the guided plan, and obviously the scripts that run alongside the two planning sessions, day 2 and day 4. I do think that's just something that is just, and I don't think anyone does it intentionally, because we do planning sessions, but I just think they're massively ineffective. And I think if you do 20 of them a year, in a lot of instances, from my own experience, are just 20 sort of wasted lessons. So it's how do we make those planning sessions sort of hyper effective? And I think part of that is what the book does, which is model to children explicitly via a script and model text and modeled plans, which are in there, is teaching them how to plan effectively. But I think it's easier to plan effectively when you've also done step 1, which is the familiarity script of the explicit modeled right to start with, so that when it comes to planning, you have that really strong understanding of what it looks like and feels like and sort of tastes like to write. So that when it comes to planning for yourself, that's a much more sort of vivid, embedded sort of experience that you've got. So the planning is far more valuable. So I think those two things link together really, really nicely.
I'd like to piggyback on that a little. What I really love about this book, the text types, is that looking at it, it's a one-stop shop. I've just lost my words there. No, as a teacher, I can, if I envision myself as one of my students, novice teachers, having to teach writing, then that's what a lot of my students say in my writing classes. They say, we're supposed to go out to school and we're supposed to teach, first of all, English as a foreign language and writing in English in a foreign language, when we can't even write, in German, or teach people how to write in German. I think that is an excellent resource, and that's, we wish, well, I was going to say we wish we had more of those, but no, we don't want more of those, because we want this one to be the one.
No, and I think the books in conjunction hopefully will help a lot of teachers upskill their practice when it comes to writing, and then ultimately that has a big impact on the pupils, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? The teachers and the pupils, and they will save a massive amount of time, and they will have a massive impact. I think one of my phrases that I always like to use is teaching simplified, learning amplified. That's my little mantra. So I think ultimately that's every book that I've written. The aim of it is to do that, is to simplify the content so that teachers feel really empowered, and ultimately it has to have a significant positive impact on the children, and that's what I hope they'll do.
I think that's the key word, that teachers feel empowered, and they can only feel empowered if they have the confidence to do, what
Yeah.
they need to do for the students. So thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you, everyone. We have come to the end of this sponsored show. Thank you, Bloomsbury, for the show. Thank you, Andrew, for being here with
Thank
us.
you for having me.
Okay, talking about sentences, always a pleasure.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, a world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused